So I think one of the most interesting things I took away from the book as I was reading it. So this is a line I came up with as I was writing the introduction to our interview, which I was very proud of. But I mean, if you look at other sorts of injuries, say in the United States, like my bone isn't going to break any differently than a 26-year-old dude in Nigeria. But it does seem like when it comes to our mental illnesses or mental faculties, there does seem to be a difference in when things go wrong, how they go wrong. So what do you think it is about specifically like Nigeria that makes it so susceptible to like I don't want to I'm kind of hesitant to call them superstitions given the arguments you make in your book, but
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't call it superstitions because that's sort of superstitions are what we call other people's beliefs that we don't sort of share, and we have our own beliefs
yeah,
that, other people don't necessarily share, and ours kind of center around physical properties and physical things and sort of a mechanistic understanding of things, and we really believe strongly in that, and so that, uh, I mean, your arm won't break the same way, but the way that you kind of your belief in the power of sort of the healer and the medicine you're getting also can affect the course of your recovery and things like that. So there is an element of that in that. It's going to be a
yeah,
lot less strong than in something like a mental illness. But one of the things I kind of came to in over the course of the book was this thinking that you know almost all illnesses can be thought of in this kind of looping way, with one part that's sort of more physiological, one
yeah,
part that's more sort of psychological, our beliefs and expectations, and some of those are going to have a really strong biological part of the loop, and some are going to have a really strong psychological part of the loop. But they all have a little bit, at least, of each of those,
mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of the things that we tend to think of everything more on the biological side or the sort
Yeah.
of mechanistic side, but there's that piece that's there that you can see in some of these conditions um, that we wouldn't really expect to be there, even though from the outside it would be clear to other people who are not part of our culture.
Yeah, so just to sort of hone in on penis theft, you call it koro.
Yes.
I think there's another name. So what's it called in China? If you remind
In
me.
China, it's called Suyang, I think, in
Yeah.
Mandarin, and then and Shukyang in Cantonese, and so it's got a lot of different names. Like in
Yeah.
Thailand, they call it Rukju, and
Hmm.
there was another. I can't remember all the names, but the Koro, the word comes from uh, a word on the island of Bujinese, which I don't know which island that is. It's in Indonesia, but it means the head of the turtle.
All right. So
That's
yeah,
originally where it comes from, like in the 1800s, I think.
yeah.
So
So the idea is that someone who's afflicted with koro, you have this really great scene early in your book where you describe sort of walking through. Is it Nairobi? Where you're walking through
Lagos, yeah,
Lagos, right?
in
Sorry.
Nigeria, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
So you're walking through the city and you're trying to bump into people to see,
Hmm.
because I guess this is the way that Koro sort of spread, is just this physical contact where someone kind of bumps into you. And the idea is that they
Yeah.
literally steal your penis. So your penis starts retracting into your body and then you die. Is that?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and it's always that kind of bumping in or doing something weird that seems like intentional, but the person can't quite figure out what the intention is,
Yeah.
and there's like suspicion there, and then the victim sort of feels their genitals shrinking into their body, and there hasn't really been much research on whether there is actual shrinkage, because with sort of fear and cold,
Yeah.
you can sort of pull, your genitals can kind of pull a little bit into your
Yeah.
body. So it's possible there's that element going on there too. But they in Nigeria, people believe it's magic and that your penis is kind of gone or shrinking or being stolen for
Yeah.
magic, and that you have to like get this person and get them to give it back, otherwise you're gonna die.
And this does, and
Yeah,
this
but
does,
in sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and this does happen almost exclusively in men. Are there cases of like women contracting
Yeah, there's case
Koro?
of men. It's usually a smaller percentage, like 10 or maybe 20%. I can't. It differs by case, but usually women feel their breasts are being pulled into their body, I think, is what the usual scenario is. Like in China, in Hainan Island, where I went where there was a huge epidemic.
Yeah.
It's different. Like it's a different idea of what's going on there. It's more to do with sort of hot and cold elements or ghosts or something like that.
Yeah.
Some mix of those things. There was one of the things that was reported was women putting iron pins through their nipples to keep them from being retracted into their bodies. Wow. You know, and sometimes they get infected, and so that was one of the injuries people had from the epidemic. Wow. Also some pulling injuries. But when I was there, so about a year after I left, I was there in 2013, and then the next year, my translator emailed me and said that a friend of hers who's from Hainan Island, in southern China, from this town called Ladong, which was one of the places where they have these things, that a woman was playing cards there, and she felt like her breasts were being pulled into her body, and went into panic, and then the whole town went into panic. And we don't have any numbers for that epidemic, you know, because it was just sort of didn't really become an official thing. But that was an example of a woman having it and kind of starting a epidemic there just recently.
Yeah. So so you told this great story about this school in China, which I think sheds a little bit of light on the sort of social transmission.
Yeah. It happened in a little village called Fuhu in southern China, south of Guangzhou a little bit.
Yeah.
And this boy was playing ping pong, and he felt his penis being shrinking into his body, and he panicked and he ran home, and his parents called the local healer, and they and this old woman, she was like 80 years old. She gave him some treatment, some traditional Chinese medicine treatments, and said, you know, this is dangerous, you know, this is what you need to do. So then he went back, and I think he told the principal or told his friends or something. Yeah. Anyway, the principal gathered all 700 or so students into the courtyard and announced that this thing had happened to this kid. I don't know if he named him, but that would be sort of traumatic, I would think. But he described in detail this thing that happened. It says it's very dangerous, so if it happens to you, be sure to get treatment for it. And then the next day, some more kids it happened to, and then the next day, some more kids it happened to, and then by the end, it was, I think, like 64 kids who had this, and you know, and I like that story because it kind of illustrates how these things happen. You know, you hear these stories, and they become, they're especially powerful when it happens to somebody you know, not somebody who's far away. So somebody you know personally, those stories are more powerful than sort of distant ones. But you sort of hear about these stories. They become possible, then they become familiar, and then they become real. And always when they interview people who these have happened to, they all have previous knowledge of it. You know, and so that's a condition for having it, is to know about it and know how it works and to believe that it's a dangerous thing. And so that's sort of where the belief thing side comes into things.